Welcome back. You should have gone through this first YouTube video to get a layout of the class. Now we're going to go into the Leadership Thinking PowerPoint introduction and overview. As mentioned briefly, you're going to need one of the slides in this for the first quiz. We're going to use the concepts in it throughout the course. You are going to have a wiki about halfway through the course or a third of the way through the course that deals with it, and then the final paper or final assignment will also use it as a basis. So you want to understand it to really be able to track with what's going on in the class and to be successful all the way throughout the course. I'm going to click on the Class Materials tab and Materials Used in Class, and since I didn't show you this on the first video, and by the way, there's the video for buying the Restwell Lodges, just as an aside. I'm going to click on Materials Used in Class, Leadership Thinking, Like a Leader, Framework PowerPoint, and here we are. I'm going to click on this. So we got the full page. So this is all about thinking like a leader, and that's what we want to talk about. First question, what is a leader? And I want you to pause this just for a second and say, how would you define a leader? Just stop it a second. Okay, now I'm going to give you a definition that says it's a person people follow when they don't have to. It's not my definition. At the moment I forget exactly where I got that, but it's a pretty good definition. A person people follow when they don't have to. The second question is, what's the difference between management and leadership? They're both important, but they're definitely different. And there can be you'll see a lot of different views of that. I'm going to show you what's really considered the official view, if you will, and the way these terms are normally used. And John Carter was very influential in coming up with that. Management has to do with executing day-to-day operations to meet goals. People would say keep the trains running. There's a lot of challenges with this, and there's people who are leaders who are not necessarily very good at this. But think day-to-day operations, driving to meet some departmental goals. Leadership has to do with having a vision for the future and changing operations and changing an organization to get there. So when you think leadership, think vision and change. When we talked about the Restwell Lodges inbox simulation we're going to do, where you're taking over a hotel that's got 6 months to improve its profitability or it's going to close. Boy, you need to make some real significant changes there, and managing the people side is probably much more challenging, at least in most cases, is much more challenging than managing the operations side and the technical, the changes you really need to make. And you better have a vision and a picture that you can share with people about where you're going. So they're very different, okay? And I've run into this actually many times as a consultant in conversations with clients, and also as a leader, executive myself, talking with others, where we'd be talking about a particular position the company wants to fill, and they'd say, well, do we need a leader or do we need a manager? And what the question was, do we need someone who can come in and run this really well and really effectively and continually improve it, or do we need someone to really completely change it and take it in a new direction for any number of reasons? There's a saying we used to talk about with clients when I was consulting, and we'd say in some cases, if you have a department that's been working to improve its productivity and say improve its quality, and they've gotten pretty good, that in some ways it might be easier to improve their productivity or improve their quality 50% than it would be to improve it 5%. And people say, well, how can that possibly be? Well, at 5%, you try to keep doing the same things better, faster, more effectively. That's management. At 50%, there's no way you can keep doing the things the way you're doing. You have to completely change what you're doing, and what your department looks like is going to be completely different. And you don't do that unless you really have to, but when you have to, it's a different set of skills. And then going along with Kotter's Kotter's scheme, and this gentleman has summarized it here: budgeting and planning, organizing and staffing, controlling and problem solving. That's really management, and you can see these questions to ask. And then with leadership, it's setting a direction and vision, communicating and motivating. And we're going to get into much of this during the semester. When you do Restwell Lodges, you're going to be doing some of both, but a lot of this. And over here, the basic categories. These, by the way, this should look familiar from a prior class, perhaps. These are questions to ask to keep yourself out of a no-win situation as a manager. These are questions to ask yourself if you're going to be a leader, and if you're doing the things you need to do to be effective as a leader. And some of these up here, I've oftentimes, in fact, all of these, I have seen major change initiatives stopped because you didn't have positive answers for these. And if somebody wants you to come in and change things and they're not on board with this, you've got a big problem. These are a little more how you implement it, but you need to make sure that if you're in a position where someone says our department's really screwed up, you have to come and blow it up and completely redo it, you want to make sure these are in place. That's the role and function of this slide. And again, management, execute day-to-day operations to meet goals. This is a vision, having a vision, and changing an organization and operations to meet the vision. Both very important. People who are good at one aren't necessarily good at the other, and it's just what the situation requires. And I'm talking in terms of really of specific formal leadership here, not informal leadership. Okay, so now what it takes to be a great leader. This dovetails in with the last slide. You need to lead yourself, you need to be able to lead change and have a business perspective. And as I talked about in the first video, these pieces all roll into here. Just a quote to keep in mind. You don't want a marketing expert running marketing. You want a business person who knows a lot about marketing. I lost my my other quote here. But same thing. You don't want a finance expert running finance. You want a business person who understands a lot about finance. And so on and so forth. Same with operations. You don't want an operations person running operations. You want a business person who knows a lot about operations. What's the point? You need someone who's got depth of expertise and ability in some area that they're working, but they understand that the company is much bigger than their area, and they have that perspective, and they don't just make decisions that are bad for the organization because they're good for their department. It's a key skill of a leader, and so that's what that's all about. This should look familiar too. I use this if you had me for a techniques class, you had something that looked a lot like this. Here's 4 thought patterns or 4 principles. If you think about these and you think this way, you really understand them, and you can act on them and implement them, you will be more effective than probably 90% of the people that are out there in managerial or leadership type position. The first one is results, not excuses, and as we go through the course, we'll be unpacking some of these. Secondly, take care of your people and they will take care of you. The third one is to get buy-in, tap into what already motivates a person. And when you get to the self-interest and motivation bloggers that we're going to be covering a little bit later with among the leadership experts, you're going to see this. I did this when I was at a company. I was asked to take over an engineering group and a product development group. 2 others had failed to do it. I had to take it over, and by being able to tap into what the real career desires were of the people on the team, the different engineers, and line them up with the roles that I needed, you would not believe the pull that you got and the results that you got. This is dynamite. It is very powerful. So we're going to talk about that. And people like to help people at work that they like and respect. So that has to do with how you get along. Covey talks about those things. If you remember Crucial Conversations from BizCom class, that's important. And respect speaks to integrity. And we'll be unpacking all these. So in short, results in relationships. This one, and I might encourage you even to just print this thing out, this slide out, and keep it with you as you go through it. What I've done is organize the teachings of all the different leaders you're going to be covering in the next 4 weeks, and put them into this framework that you can kind of wrap your mind around. Because over the next several weeks, you're going to be watching a number of videos, you're going to be doing a number of quizzes, you're going to be doing some small group discussions where you try to summarize the teachings of these leaders, and then you get done and we're going to apply it in Restoral Lodges, but even beyond that, it's like, Dan, what do I do with this stuff? And what I'm going to suggest to you is, as a leader, as a potential leader, you need to ask yourself 3 basic, really fundamental questions. How should I conduct myself? How should you conduct yourself? How should you treat your employees? It's huge. And how do you manage change successfully? And we've already talked already, you should be getting a feel that leadership has a lot to do with change. Under how you conduct yourself, Covey and Christensen have a lot to say about that. Christensen is an article you'll be reading a little in a couple of weeks. Collins' video on Level 5 Leaders. There's 2 Collins videos, and this is the one on Level 5 Leaders, and Bob David's Leadership Without Ego. They all give you pointers, and I summarize them here and just give a little tagline there. That's important. So you can start to organize these guys and their teachings, and as you think about how do I really want to conduct myself in the workplace. How do you treat your employees? Chapman and Pollard have a lot to say, and so do the self-interest and motivation bloggers. And I summarize them here. And what is really important for you to think about is how do you treat your employees, is there's two parts to it. There's the human side of it, okay, where you do some things that you treat them as people first, and you care about their impact, and so the impact you have on their personal lives. And as you read these, and even C. Christensen covers this, the implications for how your style of leadership impacts people's personal lives. We'll be talking more about that. But there's that side, and then there's also the self-interest piece, what I just talked to you about on the last slide. People have things that motivate them. If you can find out what they are and tap that into what you need, then you're going to have tremendous motivation. So there's the self-interest side, and with them, what's in it for me? The appeal to self-interest never fails was what one great CEO told me. But you've kind of got that part where you're working to craft win-wins, but you're also looking at the human side. And that's the two sides of how you treat employees. In Managing Change Successfully, we've got Cotter. Blanchard has a very good video on that. And also, Collins' second video, he talks about the attributes of somebody that you want on your team. How do you manage change successfully? Let me talk just real briefly about these. Cotter, with his 8 steps, the reason we're talking about Cotter is because when I was, for most of my career, close to 30 years, I was almost always involved. It was built around change management. I have more experience in that than just about anything. And I had, what I started to find when I began teaching, I knew I was going to teach change management, is I thought, well, when I was doing things in consulting, and I was doing things at a little venture capital funded startup, and then I'm doing things at a 5,000 person company, and then I'm doing things at a 25 person company, and there's these common threads: creating urgency, having short-term wins. I mean, there are a series of things, and I thought I'm going to need to build a methodology. But before I do that, I'm just going to see what's out there. And I found Cotter and his 8 steps, and I thought, holy cow, this guy has just described what I've been doing for the last, two and a half decades. So that's why I'm big on Cotter, because I've lived it, and I lived it before I ever knew about this guy and what he did. So we're going to talk about that. Blanchard has some very good things to say. And the third guy, Collins, talks about the 6 attributes of a key player. So you'll see Collins comes in twice, and you also see when in the organizational quizzes, Cotter, we hit him twice. We hit the 8 steps of change, and then we hit urgency a couple weeks later, and then we summarize them. But Collins talks about attributes of key players. That's so critical because you're going to need to find some go-to people that you can rely upon to help you get things done. If you try to go it alone, you're going to become a bottleneck. You become a bottleneck, you're going to fail. And so you might have a team of 4 or 5 people, you might have one go-to person, but you need somebody who can help you with the heavy lifting, because otherwise it's just not going to work. And Collins gives a really good description of the kind of people you're looking for. So in summary, if you think about these 3 questions, how do I conduct myself, how do I treat my employees, how do I manage change successfully, and you think about these 4 ways of thinking, you'll be in very good shape. And just as a preview of things to come, the final assignment at the end of this class is going to wind up having something to do with integrating those thought patterns and these coming attractions. Last thing, I've included this a real-life leadership vignette. You can read through this, and the reason I put it in there is because this was a gentleman that I met with in the late 90s. It's a long story, but I spent an afternoon with this gentleman, went through one of his plants, and his company, he had won a Manufacturer of the Year award. My company co-sponsored it, so I was able to do some strategic benchmarking studies, published a couple articles, and this was one of the interviews I did. And it was those 4 hours were a defining moment in my career, because that is where I saw modeled what it meant to be a leader. And so I wanted to give a vignette in this. I could have put 4 or 5 pages of what I learned that day, but these are the things that I learned related to leadership. So that's just an example for you to take a look through. So that's it for this PowerPoint, and enjoy the work that's coming up. It's a lot of work, but it should be fun. Thanks.